what we're going to do is each of us kind of has a different take on how we look at this, right? And I love starting with yours first, Kim, because the four R's really help us understand how do we work through particular dilemmas when it comes to, again, like I say, my job is focused on people with disabilities. And so there are lots of dilemmas that come into that when we're trying to balance, let's say, what somebody who can't see needs versus what somebody who can't hear needs, or somebody with a a non um, a, a non-visual or not visible disability, like even ADHD or neurodiversity. And so that's why this is really critical for me. And I love starting with the 4R model, Kim, because it really teaches those win-win-win models of
Yeah.
approach and how we can make that work. So, Kim, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay.
Take us to about 12:30, 12:31, and then we'll come back and I'll talk and then we'll debrief from there.
So I had the privilege last summer of giving a TEDx talk, and this was my title: is why cultural competence should be the new DEI. So that's why that comes up. But I would like you to think about the last time you felt truly seen, like you felt like you could bring your whole self to the table. And what was the difference? What was the difference in that experience? And I would like to posit that cultural competence encompasses the very essence of diversity and inclusion. It places a profound emphasis on equality through understanding. And by doing that, it creates psychological safety where you can go from, I feel welcome here, I belong, to, I feel comfortable speaking out. And, I can be bold and share the eccentric ideas and things like that. But we all have dilemmas that come up, right, regularly. Most of them are cultural, but they're dilemmas, and how we deal with them is really important. And if I could just share one of my favorite um, dilemma stories. This is a true story from one of my colleagues. She had two daughters come home. They were both in college and they came home and they both ran in the kitchen and there was one orange in the orange bowl. And they both put their hands on the orange. And the mom, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to cut the orange in half, she took a minute and she asked questions. Why did each of them want the orange? What were they intending to do with it? And she found out that one daughter had just worked out and she wanted to eat the orange. The other one was having friends over later for dinner and she wanted the orange peel for a recipe that she was making. And so by asking questions, the mother was able to create a win-win situation. I would say a win-win-win. So win for each of them and then a win for the community, right? Because everyone was thriving in that situation. So what the 4 R's are is it's important to recognize when there's a dilemma, right? Here's a situation. Um, and how can we address this situation? The second thing is to show respect. I think if people know that they respect you, it gives them that amount of psychological safety that they would not have otherwise. And then you work to reconcile that situation. So okay, what are the opposites, beliefs? What are some of the in between beliefs? What are the strengths and weaknesses of each of those beliefs? How can we create that win-win? I'm a big fan of the 5 whys, asking why over and over again. Sometimes we try to reconcile symptoms of the problem and not the real problem, right? And so by asking why at least 5 times, that can help you get to what the problem is as a whole. And then realizing the impact that that reconciliation had, and some would say rooting it so that you could use that going forward. Those are kind of examples of the four R's. But the most important thing in dealing with the four R's is coming together with empathy, collaboration, and again, respect. So, really thinking about how, what would it be like if you walked in that person's shoes, right? Sandra Miles, an author that I really like, said to shift from the traditional to the inclusive, we can start by adopting strategies guided in empathy, collaboration, and respect. So, what is this person going through? How can I put myself in walking a mile in their shoes? How can you really hear them, right? Really hear them while you're trying to understand what the situation is. And then respect is the glue that holds all teams and organizations together. I'm sure you see a lot of that in your jobs, right? It creates the team, right? And you have that psychological safety. And that allows you to collaborate in a way that you would not normally be able to collaborate. And I just want to encourage you, when you are thinking through things, to think about those four R's. How can you recognize? How can you show respect? How can you reconcile the situation and then realize the effects of that? I think it can be life changing. And I'm all about helping people live their best life at work. We spend a lot of hours at work. And how can we turn it up and create an environment where everyone can thrive? And yeah, I'm actually working on my fourth and fifth books right now related to that. So those are the 4 hours. Did I do okay? Actually, I was kind of fast, wasn't I, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm pretty impressed with that actually. I
What?
really am. Look at Kim go today. I mean, she is on a roll. I love it. All right. Oh my goodness. Very good. Well, so I want to build off of what Kim is talking about. Um, and one of the things that I love to do when I start this conversation is to really ask the question. So, in all seriousness, I love discussion. Feel free to unmute, right? But most facilitators, most educators, most leaders that I know, they think they're inclusive until someone in the room can't participate. And so let me make this real. If you feel comfortable, unmute, or Kim, watch for thumbs up.
Okay.
So I'm a blind facilitator. I've led rooms of 200 people before, and I can tell you that most designs that we have on how we bring people together are not inclusive and they don't work. But let me ask you this. Have you ever taught a group or had a discussion with a group of people and said, "Does everybody get it? Do y'all understand what I'm saying?" Has anybody ever done that? I know I have. So
I
I'll
have.
yeah, okay.
Yep. Suzanne, Tiffany,
Yep, excellent. Now,
Melissa.
now go ahead and raise your hand or say I if you have ever had someone that has nodded yes to that question of getting it and then come up to you after the meeting and say, "I really don't understand."
Oh, all the time. Not all the time, I should say, but yes, it's happened to me.
I have at least one in every group,
Yeah.
right? And by the way, I do this for a living,
Yes.
right? So, you know, that gap right there though, where people say they understand but they really don't, or maybe they're struggling with it, that's where inclusion fails. So when we're talking about inclusion, we're not just talking like my lens is through employment of people with disabilities, but I'm
Right.
not just talking about people with disabilities. I'm talking about everybody,
Right.
right? Um, so why is this important and how can I really take this to a new level? So I was doing a conversation with about 10. So have I, Melissa. Melissa says, I've been the one to nod yes and then go and ask for clarification. Absolutely.
Yes.
And to that impact or to understanding why that happens, it's because there may not be an opportunity to actually make that concern known,
Right.
right? And so that's what we're really talking about is how do we design that experience in a way that's going to make everybody have that ability to speak up and to bring what they need to bring into the conversation. So for me, I have literally worked for a company and then had somebody say to me, well, you're a blind person, and even though we know you and we think you're really great, you're never going to go any further in this company. So I really just need you to, keep your head down and do your work. That is what I like to call direct and almost intimidating lack of engagement. Now, there's going to be a conversation around can they really legally do that? That's a whole different discussion,
Yeah.
right? And in that particular situation, there was no opportunity to even engage, right? It was this is how it is, deal with it, right? And so I always start with that one because I think like this isn't a black and white type of thing,
Right.
right? And I'll give you another great example of that. I was teaching a group of youth that were probably 17 to 23. And in the conversation, it was this 3-day workshop. Everything was going really great. We had it all planned out. And at the end of the workshop, they were all supposed to come up in front of the class. They were supposed to shake the facilitator's hands and then give their elevator speech in front of the whole group. 5 of the youth that were in the workshop were Somali, 4 of which were Somali women.
Mhm.
And so on Saturday night, as I'm thinking about the Sunday's activities and how everybody's going to come up to do their speech, it dawns on me Somali women are not permitted to have contact with a man unless it is a member of their family or unless there's some, other reason for
How
that,
did you
right?
know that, Jeremy?
Oh, I was pulled aside and told
Oh,
because I was trying to help somebody read something in Braille and I
okay.
touched her hand.
Oh, okay.
And you're not allowed to do that, right? And
Mhm.
so,
Mhm.
um, so in my head, I was like, well, I don't want to single these people out, right? And make it,
Right.
well, you can't do this because blah, 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 right? That's not going to work. But how could we build a strategy that allowed them the ability to engage in the way that they needed to? And so what we came up with was a very easy solution. Each person was given the option to do one of 3 things. Either one, they could shake our hand. Number 2, they could put their hand over their chest, and then we would do the same as facilitators. Or number 3, they could bring a lot of confidence to it and come up and be like, hey, I'm Jeremy. Nice to meet you. By the way, I hope it's okay. I don't shake hands.
Right.
And own it, right? There were 10 people in that course, in that workshop. Do you know 7 out of the 10 people chose to use an alternative method than to shaking hands? One person was autistic. He didn't feel comfortable touching people. The other person, she had been sick for a week and she didn't want to take the chance of giving germs to somebody else.
Yeah, that was very kind.
My point, though, is that we designed something holistically. And it wasn't just the Somali women who used it, it
Yeah.
was actually other people in the room. And so that's the framing that I want you to think about when you're working on this, right? Is I didn't need better facilitation skills or teaching skills. What I needed it was a better design for how we could get people to participate.
And Jeremy, you just told me that story the other day, and it reminded me. I have the story in the book that we're working on,
Mhm.
101 mini stories around cultural competence, and there's one story in there. I'm not sure if you've seen it yet, but it was regarding a professor at EMU, and they were reviewing their evaluations at the end of the semester, and somebody just really went off on the evaluation. Every mark was bad, all that kind of stuff. And then in their verbal comments, they said, this professor even expected to shake our hands on the first day of class.
Mm.
And they had been holding that as a grudge like the whole semester. And, the professor felt so bad,
Mhm.
but, they didn't know. And so, yeah, I think creating those options is really, really important.
I think, and I love, so I'm going to actually piggyback on this. I'm going to share my screen. I did put a picture in the chat. And so if because sometimes I have trouble sharing on my screen, Kim,
Mm,
this particular handout, I think
mm.
is that showing up there
Yeah,
for
yeah,
you?
it
Okay,
is.
awesome. So I call this the participation pathway model. And it's not complicated, right? We're talking about listening. We're talking about thinking about how you're engaging, think about how you're owning, and think about how you're asking questions. And so I want to come back. I think it may have been Melissa, but I might be wrong because I kind of my screen reads stuff as you guys are posting it in the chat, and I was talking at the time, so I might have the name wrong. But you had mentioned that sometimes you need time to process, right?
Yes.
Before you can come back up and ask a question.
Yeah.
And even that needs to be thought about. Why do we take this approach? Well, very early in my career, I met a guy named Steve Cady who studied under Kathleen Dannemiller. Kathleen, amazing lady, by the way, was facilitating from her scooter when I met her. I love that lady, right? She was a pioneer in large scale change. Um, but they told me very on people learn in three different ways. Some people learn visually. By the way, as a blind guy, that's usually not me. Sorry, Melissa. I guess it was somebody else's comment. Um, uh, some people learn verbally. Some people learn viscerally. And it
Mm,
means they have to not just hear it or see it, but they really have to feel it. It's got to connect with them. And what I propose to you is if you keep that principle in the back of your mind, the rest of this just flows perfectly.
mm,
So the first thing you want to do is you want to listen. So not just listening to words, listen to who's not speaking.
mm.
Listen to who's confused but staying quiet. You can tell them, by the way. You want to know how I tell them as a blind facilitator? Literally, I'll hear them go,
Mm.
and it's just there, right? Energy shifts that maybe you don't even see. So you may not have a chance to watch all 100 people in the room, but you might have like a commonality of people who, instead of sitting up, you see them kind of hunched over, right? Is there a reason for that? Notice I'm not saying make assumptions, just think about those things, right? Engage. This is how do you engage them? So design multiple ways to. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that comment. I'll come back to it though. Um, design multiple ways to participate. So speaking is one option. Writing, pairing, reflecting. This comes back to the comment that was made earlier. Figure out a way to get reactions into the mix. I like to design activities that are based around what we call the individual to the group to the whole. So it gives someone the space to think about things individually, then they bring it to a smaller group, and then that smaller group gets to bring it out to the whole.
Jeremy,
So that's a way to do that. Yes, Kim.
Glenna's question was, what happens when someone breaks the link?
Tell me more. I'm not getting the question. So Glenna, tell me what you mean by breaks the link.
Well, the link is access to safety, to clarity, contribution, ownership, and action. If you have
Uh-huh.
the first three and the contribution is not for the whole team, and then she or this person will just take ownership of everything else, you broke the link.
I see where you're going from. This is more for you to think about how you're designing their participation. So, ideally, as facilitators, as teachers, as leaders, we're in the piece where we're holding that space for people, and so don't think of this necessarily as the participant's job. This is our job to help the participants.
But Jeremy, you raise a really good point in that I feel like I've been in situations and people are not doing this properly, right? They're kind of
They may do one or the other, or not
yeah,
all,
yeah,
right?
or
Yeah.
they're taking ownership of the whole thing, and sometimes I will speak up and say, does anyone else have any contributions, or is it okay if we ask for others ideas and things like that? Sometimes it's well received. you know
Well, I agree with you, and I think that so this is the difference between being the participant and being the one whose job it is
right.
to increase participation, right? I am your, how do I say this? I don't want to say I'm your worst nightmare. That's a terrible public thing to say.
You can say it.
I know, but someone's gonna clip it and then it'll be out there for
But
me.
could I
But
say,
if I'm in a meeting that someone hasn't followed these principles, I can be one of the most annoying people in the room, right? But at the same time, and I think this may just be because I'm a person with a disability, and so there are always ways that I have to figure. Like I was in a meeting the other day, and literally they said, "Look at the 20 questions on the board and decide which one you want to answer." There was nobody reading those questions, right? And so, I had to choose. We had 1 minute, by the way, to answer one of the 20 questions. I don't even know that that was a feasible request in the first place. Um, but trying to get, in that particular case, I called the facilitator over and one-on-one said, you got to read me 5 of those questions, right? Rather than say, hey, you've not designed this very well,
right,
and this is probably not going to work out well, right?
right,
So I think it's how you have that dialogue and when you choose to have it.
yeah,
It's a really good question, though, and I appreciate you bringing it up. I just misunderstood the question. That's why I
yeah.
was asking you for clarity. Let's talk about the last 2 of these because I don't want to run over here. The own part. Stop owning the communication and the facilitation as the that I did not say that right. Stop owning the conversation as the facilitator. And what I mean by that is we as teachers and facilitators, our job is to get people sharing wisdom within the room. So there's always a spot where we have that teachable moment, but it's what we do after that teachable moment that's going to transcend their barriers to actually doing something with it. And so I like to look for ways to shift the ownership of a conversation to the participants. I'll give you an example. If I'm doing an activity where you might normally see everybody puts a bunch of stuff up on the wall, and then as a facilitator, you'll usually see someone step back and they'll look around the room and they'll go, well, folks, what I'm seeing are the common themes of,
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing that as a facilitator. And yes, I'm being a little playful in my tone, right? Because it just sounds like so us versus them when we do that. But instead, build in a 15-minute break. And while people are at break, they have to take a crayon. Everybody loves a crayon. I can't say that word because I'm from Ohio. Crayon, originally. And you have them take their crayon and they go around and they put a check mark beside the things that they feel are most critical in moving forward. And then what I do is the first 3 people done voting, like they go take their break, and then when they come back, they circle the heavy hitters. And it's them who says it. And so you'll have Jason on one side of the room going, So as I looked at what everybody said, here are the things that got the top votes. Notice he's not telling us what he saw. He's interpreting the vote,
Right.
right? So that's a way that you can design ownership in that. And by the way, if they don't own what's coming out of their conversation, they'll never act on it. And that's the key, right? We want people to do something with what they're learning. We got to get them to participate in that process more fully. The last piece that I like to talk about is the ask part. So we'll spend a lot of time thinking about how we design the questions. We're very good at that, right? But don't ask questions like, does everybody get it? Does that make sense? Everybody will always say yes to you, right? Instead, what you can say is, how is this resonating with you? What are you taking away from this dialogue? Those are kind of that open-ended piece. And you're going to have a client or even you that might say, oh, I don't know if I can do open-ended. That could get crazy. Trust me, you got it. It'll be fine, right? It's how you design that piece. Replace the phrase any questions. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah.
You'll be there all day, right?
Well,
But if you ask the question, what's one thing that's not sitting right with you yet? That's a different conversation. By the way, that's going to help have people, they're going to say, wow, okay, what can I actually, do with this and how can I use it? Right? Or what's one thing that's resonating with you and why? The key line is that facilitation that's inclusive or teaching that's inclusive is not about doing it because it's the right thing to do or because it's nice. It's about being very intentional with how we get people to participate. So I wanted to just kind of cover that. I know I went a little over, Kim. I'm sorry. I tried to do this as quickly as I could. One of the things that I do want you to know is that each of us, because you registered for the webinar, Kim is, there's a thing that the Institute for Culture Change and Leadership put together with the 4 R's. And I've got a handout for you that I'm going to send you that talks about the participation model that we just reviewed. And so we're going to get that out to you and get it so that you have the ability to have that available to you and you can kind of talk about that or ask us for more help on that. But I know we've got about 15 minutes left, and so I'm going to open the dialogue, Kim, and just say to our participants, how is this resonating with you? So you got to answer that question first. And then what question do you have that if you got it answered today would help you in applying some of what you've learned? So does anybody want to go and kind of weigh in for us? How is this resonating with you? And what question, if you asked it, would help us, help you apply this a little more?
Can I just say that I did post this in the chat, that I think stories are a great way to really get that visceral learning, right?
I agree with you very much so. And Peter Block has some really great, what is it, the dyad triad type of thing. Like one of the things that I find is really fun to do, and people think it's like, oh, cool, we can get them to know each other. Right. But let's come back to the comment that was made about sometimes I need to process. Sometimes it can be really helpful to just say, you know what, take 2 minutes to think about how you'd introduce yourself to someone and then pair up with someone and actually introduce yourselves to each other. And then guess what? You're going to get into groups of 4 and each of the pair has to introduce the other person.
Yeah.
And it's a really good way to get people engaged. But notice I'm giving that beginner time to think about it internally instead of just pushing it on you and say, go, 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 right?
Right.
Okay, I want to hear from others. Come on, don't be shy. Everybody's muted. Are you guys okay?
Are you still
Hope,
awake?
hopefully I didn't lose you. That would
Just
feel terrible.
processing.
Oh, I love it.
I love it.
Oh.
Awesome.
Well, I will say this absolutely resonates. I mean, we see these challenges every time that we do education, and we're always trying to think about how can we engage people, and let them participate in the ways that they feel comfortable doing that. So I think it's a challenge we think about every time we create education.
You know what, Suzanne? Do you have people when you're doing the education, they have to register first, right? Usually.
Sometimes they have to register in our learning management system, like pick between
Gotcha.
two dates or something. I
So
don't do the
here's a
conference planning,
question
but
that I recommend asking.
okay.
If nobody like seriously, I do want you to take more than this away, but if you have one thing that you want to focus in on, multitaskers, come back to the group for just a minute. Okay. I'm just teasing. I'm saying it with a smile. Um, Here's the question. Instead of saying, are there any accommodations that you need? Accommodations are fine. You can ask that question. It's always fun to actually ask both and see which one you get an answer to. I like to say, is there anything that we can do to make this a more engaging experience for you?
Ooh, I like
And
that.
what happens? Because here's what happens. Accommodations assumes that I have a disability, right? That's
Which 1 in 4 Americans do.
right. And I actually think it's higher, but that's a whole different discussion,
Yeah.
right? But that means I have to identify as having a disability, right? Think about where mental health is in this country. Not everybody is going to say, I need an accommodation. It feels legal. It feels like, oh, I have to disclose. But I will have someone who says, yes, you could make this a more engaging experience if you didn't talk at me for 60 minutes. Right?
Yeah.
Or they might say, no flashy videos. They may not tell me why, but I bet you $20 it's because they might get seizures or it might give them a headache. Right? And so when we ask that question so open-ended, they actually will tell us what we need to do to make their experience more engaging. And engaging means action. So I hope that's helpful, Suzanne.
It is. I feel like sometimes when we're doing an event like a big conference kind of a thing, we do ask people specifically about food preferences or needs just so we can accommodate. But I'll tell you, that's kind of been a disaster because even when we tell the hotels like no gluten, they'll slip something in there that has gluten in it and people get to, it's a real challenge. And that one I have not figured out how do we handle that, because for some people it's really a severe problem if they get something that they shouldn't have.
Well, and I will tell you, when you're getting into like allergies and things like that that can be life threatening. Right. And so one of the things that I really try to do is if I'm going to be in a situation like that where I got to do allergies, I'm talking like the food conversation, right?
Yeah.
Then I will literally say, you got to register and you got to do it a week in advance, right? In order to make sure that we got it. One of the other things that I actually have done is how do we get that food into the hands of people? And I will literally take like gluten-free and move it off to the side.
We do that too. Yes.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Could they have their own box?
They should.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I want to check in, Glenna, Melissa, Tiffany, not trying to put you on the spot. I just don't want to leave you out.
And you got me thinking, Jeremy, when you were talking about, after I said stories, maybe mini case studies or just case studies in group work, right? And then there can be like a list of questions that they answer in relation to the case. I think can really get people more engaged. And the shorter the case study, the better. Ever since I got my PhD, that's my mantra.
I mean, so so case studies are great, stories are great. Think about how you present that activity,
Mm,
right? And
mhm,
so, for example, one of the things that I've been doing with each of you is I shared on the screen, but I also put the picture in the chat. There may be some of you who need to pull that picture up on your phone,
right.
right? There may be one of you who has trouble seeing the picture on the screen share, but if you open it on your computer, you can see it in more detail, right? And so that's why when we have that sharing like that, for example, if we were in a place where I was sharing um, oh my goodness, what do we call that? A PowerPoint with you. Like when
Mhm,
Kim, when you did your PowerPoint,
mhm,
we should have put a link in the chat so that people can open the PowerPoint on their own device and
mm.
actually see that if they need to,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And some people say, yeah, but I'm giving it to them and they're not going to participate. Remember, certain people learn by looking,
Mhm,
by hearing, and by feeling it. And by the way, when you put looking and feeling together, they're feeling it,
right.
especially if you bring it with your words.
Right.
Any other questions, thoughts, comments?
For me, I just wanted to say that, well, first of all, this was all extremely amazing.
Mm,
But the way you post the questions about switching your questions, not, do you have any questions or is there any concerns or
right.
something like that, but more as how is this resonating? What
Mhm.
things are not sitting right? I think those are things that I struggle with in the conversation of how to engage people to point things out to me,
Mm.
or you to be comfortable bringing up, to give that space. And so I think those were very helpful kind of transitions or even like check-in points that I think would be very easy for me to incorporate into what I do on my team, as well as how I speak with participants and things like that. So I appreciate that.
I think
Yeah.
that's so very helpful.
Hmm.
Um, because it gives the ability to really take it to the next level, right? If I want to know, and I'll tell you, so for example, let's say we're looking at a document with each other, right? I won't say, does anything need fixed? Like we could be here all day on periods and commas,
Right.
right? And instead, what I'll say is, what needs to be added, deleted, or changed to make this document represent where you feel we need to go?
Mm.
And that's a
I like that.
very different conversation,
Generative
right?
questions.
Hmm. Yep. And
Absolutely.
and
Yep.
I feel in research we're very much trained when we're trying to obtain data or information to not go open-ended because it's
Right.
hard to quantify that, or to compare it. But I feel like those more open-ended, but are also guided in a way to get that information that you need to be able to move forward and to keep the engagement is very important in any dialogue, whether it's the workplace, whether it's you're doing
Yep.
research, or whether it's just communicating. Um, and so I love these examples. I'm an example learner and a visual learner, so this is
Mm.
also very helpful
There we go.
to yes, yes. I'm kind of multifaceted that way. If you just speak it, I'm not going to. There's a chance I might not quite get it, but if you give it to
Right.
me a couple different ways, I got it.
Yep.
So this was all. It was kind of useful for me as well from a personal perspective of, oh yeah, see that makes more sense to me. I'm sure there are other people I speak with on a regular basis that could maybe be more engaging if I present it in a couple different ways.
And Melissa, that's why I'm a quantitative and a qualitative gal.
Researcher. Yeah, well, and I will tell
Oh,
you that the way that I frame that question, right, is there anything that we can do to increase your participation, or is there anything that we can do to help create a more engaging experience? I started doing that when I was a contractor for Ipsos. Ipsos is a leading research firm. And they started realizing that when you said, do you have a disability? Is there any accommodation that you need? Then there was an added piece that I had to identify as in order to be able to check those boxes. And so it's those open-ended questions that are going to get people engaging. Melissa, thanks. I know we lost our other 3 participants because they had to run to a meeting, but I do want to do an official wrap up. Kim, how can people get a hold of you and find out more about the Institute for Culture Change and Leadership and the upcoming course that you're teaching and I'm supporting on?
ICCL.online.
Excellent. And when's that course start, Kim?
The end of the month.
Excellent. So you can find more information and contact information for Kim. And then again, I do want to say inspirationfoundation.org is how you can find out more about the Inspiration Foundation and what I do on a daily basis to increase opportunities and employment opportunities for people with disabilities. Definitely want to talk with you more. And thank you so much for coming to today's webinar. It's been really great to get to know all of you.
It was nice to meet you.
And
Thank you for having us.